It is often that I come to pray here, reflecting on times past. Those days were so bright and filled with love and light. I remember the smiling faces of my two daughters, whose voices and laughter echo still in my mind as it did in our home. I remember a wife whose eyes were filled with caring and love when she gazed upon them and me. I remember feeling blessed to have such a life. And I was. Such moments anyone is lucky to have. Those memories of hearth and home, love and light would last me a lifetime. And it would have to. That night was so dark and terrible, coming home to a house that seemed as if a whirlwind has whisked through it, leaving tossed and upended items and furniture behind in its wake. Where hearth was usually alight and casting warmth, there was only cold darkness. Where there was usually laughter and the voices of family, there was only now silence. I searched the house, calling out their names as I did, but there was still only silence in return. I stood motionless in the center of the main room, the dawning thought that they were all taken by some evil and wicked hands growing in me. But I hoped they were still alive also beat in my chest, and that there would be time to save them. I gathered what I quickly could, and filled the bag with the food and goods that was scattered about, adding to it lastly a fair-sized and freshly filled water skin. I stopped beside the door, hesitating only a moment before shouldering the quarrel of arrows and taking in hand the bow that was sitting against the frame. The trail was easy to follow. Whomever they were either moving with haste or not concerned about leaving a trail. I moved quickly and followed along their path. It would wind from the fields and pastures into deeper woods, and it would eventually start to climb a rise that led to old, alien ruins that sat on a hilltop. I didn't get there in time. What was left of them lay at points in a strange pattern, sacrificed in some vile and unholy ritual that had caused their bodies to explode from the inside out and burn their flesh in a sootless fire. What the meaning of this pattern was at this time would be unknown to me, but I've come now to dread. I buried what I could, gave blessings to the divines upon their forms, that their souls would have shelter and rest in peace. Then I hunted. The trail they had so arrogantly made continued away from the ruins. I would find there was reason for this arrogance. When I finally heard the sound of men not far ahead of me, I slowed and proceeded quietly. It would do no one justice if I were killed through my own carelessness. Alongside of the road, slipping by shrubs and trees, I moved cautiously forward to have them within my sight. 8 men, dressed in black robes, followed 2 other figures in a double line. It was for the 2 at the front who were leading that gave me pause. One figure at the front was dressed in what I can only describe as clerical vestments. He was wearing a red tabard that had blazoned upon it a black skull with horns, the skull's mouth wide and filled with sharp teeth and a wicked tongue. This symbol was known to me. It was the unholy symbol of Molag Baal. But it was the other figure walking at the head of this procession that would cause a sharp intake of my breath. It was a Dremora, those unholy servants of a Daedra prince, striding beside this priest in all horrific majesty. I realized that this creature striding upon Tamriel to do the will of this priest had been the result of the ritual that had claimed my loved ones. There was purpose in their pace, and while the words between them I could not hear, the gesturing of their priest as he talked clearly showed he was in control of it, that he was the summoner. Having the benefit of an arcane education from being the child of a mage guild lore master, I knew full well what that meant, that if I killed the summoner, the link between Tamriel and Oblivion would snap closed for this Dremora, and that it would vanish and return there in the instant of the summoner's death. I had kept low and quiet, unseen and unheard. I knocked the arrow ever so gently and slowly. The summoner would die. I raised the bow and drew with a steady breath, aiming with a sure eye. Just before release, I held my breath a mere moment to make sure breathing did not falter my aim. The arrow flew to its mark, and the priest stood for a moment, blinking as blood started to pour from a mouth that was so vainly trying to say something. In the middle of the shaft sat the man's neck, fletching on one side, an arrowhead on the other. Then the priest slowly toppled to his side. The Dremora turned to look towards me, but as it drew its Daedric blade, a bluish-white light blazed around it, and it was gone. Chaos and shouting occurred among the remaining 8 robed figures. Some would go forth and take the priest in arm, seemingly hoping to do something to return life to him, but uselessly shaking him instead. Others would turn and point towards me, while those last in the line would begin the chase. I used the trail to my advantage and kept on the road, notching another arrow as I ran. None of them had a bow or crossbow to fire at me with, so it was with shock upon their faces that they realized their mistake. As soon as I had let loose one arrow to strike the chest of one of the men giving chase, I had notched another and found the next target. This one had skidded to a stop, allowing me to place the arrow in his head. The others then ran and fled, some falling over their robes that were not meant for running. These I put down as they got up. A far shot, just as one crested a hill, would leave me 3 yet alive. 2 ran together, and so I gave chase after them. With no sense to them but running in clear panic, they sought to outrun me and did not seek cover that would force me to close into melee with them. Those 2 also fell, each with an arrow in their backs. Of the last, his trail was never found. He would be the only one to escape justice, and it has plagued me since that day. I returned home. I was greeted with the same silence and remains of chaos that I had left. I fell to my knees and cried every tear that I had in me and ever will again. When they were shed, I remained kneeling. I looked out through one of the broken windows of what was once my home and gazed upon clouds lazily moving through a blue morning sky. It was then that I made an oath. I would strive with the rest of my days upon the earth to stop such a fate from befalling anyone else. And so I've hunted Daedra and their worshippers ever since.